How to be a great trans ally. Number 4, don't make assumptions based on appearances.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I think, yeah. If someone's trans masculine or trans feminine, don't automatically assume that their presentation is aligned to how they refer to themselves and what their pronouns are. Like, just because someone's trans masculine doesn't mean to say they're he, him. It might be they, them.
yeah, no, totally. Well, and just on, just there's a lot of there's already a lot of gatekeeping in transitioning in general, legal, medical. Someone might not be able to transition medically for years. I mean, in the U.S., it's very different. We're very fortunate that we have our informed consent model, and you can basically start the next day if you really want. Um, but even then, there's monetary constraints, there's social constraints, there's you know personal constraints. So someone might be trans and not look like it, and they're not an oddity. They're not there to be thought of or used in think pieces. It's just
I think. Sorry, carry on.
No.
I think that speaks to something so important, which is that the outside narrative is that there's this transition process, which is the interesting and important part of a trans person's life. But actually, that's just some people's experiences, and not to devalue its importance, but it isn't what makes someone trans. Totally. Someone is trans because they're trans. And basing things off of appearance is really buying into that narrative that these sort of couple of years where someone may have gender affirmative interventions are the only important or even interesting thing about them. And just imagine if your life was reduced to, some pills you took or a medical procedure you had. That's just really turning a human being into a thing. And
right. No, totally. And it's important to remember that the root of the word trans, as it applies to trans people, is not transition. It's the Latin, prefix that means on the other side of. And so I think there is a confusion of and that's why when we get to it, the opposite of trans is cis, because cis is the Latin prefix for on this side of. And so there is maybe a bit of just
misunderstanding.
People have it in their heads wrong, like, oh, transition. That's actually really coincidental more than anything, just based off of the way Latin prefixes work.
I think if you look at society and the heteronormative expressions of gender identity that we have had for the last 100, 200 years, it's easy for someone to accept like my transition because I used to present as male. I now present as female and I am trans. They expect that. And when anything isn't aligned to that whole transition in terms of presentation or identity, it confuses them. And I don't think the media helps either, because the media focuses far too much on past lives and surgeries rather than the identities and the person's contribution to society, for example.
Right. And there's a bit of social media hype to that, where it's really, really easy to put a picture of look at this big gross hairy dude, this hot chick, and look, they're the same person. And there's this sensationalism about it. And boy, do people love those stories.
Caitlyn Jenner, classic example.
Oh yes. Well, yeah. It's.
I'm not saying I agree with anything else that she has done, but in terms of the sensationalism of how she was and how she is now, it's that kind of focus constantly rather than looking at the other elements.
And from the sort of non-binary corner as well, because if you don't even have that narrative reductive and really limiting that it is, because you're not moving across from one to the other, people can, I think they often confuse non-binary with androgynous.
Yes.
And that can be really tricky as well, because then they kind of like, oh, you don't look XYZ. It's like, sorry, I don't conform to your idea of what I should look like. You know?
And presumably that again, the role of the media and TV and film. If I think of, you know, the appearance of in Billions of the character Taylor in Billions, who was quite androgynous on, you know, to look at, and was the first sort of mainstream non-binary character in modern TV. People then take away, oh, that's what everyone looks like, and of course we know that, you know, you can line 10 men up against a wall and they will all look completely different, and you can line 10 women up against the wall, and you could line up 10 transgender people, 10 trans, and they would all look completely different. So again, it's getting away from the, you know, the stereotypes that we see in the media and on TV.
Definitely.